Hey there, before we get going into our episode today, I wanted to just give you a quick heads up. While recording, we had some unique audio disruption and considerations that we had to navigate, and even though we've done what we can on the back end to optimize the listening experience for you, we do want to just acknowledge that this episode has a little bit of difference in how loud we are versus how loud our guest is. We did want to keep this episode available to you because we think it has such great content, but did just want to give you a heads up that it's going to be a little bit different than your typical listening experience with our podcast. And with that, let's get right to it.
So it isn't about telling them why it's such a good investment, and it isn't about making sure they have the metrics. It's about, do you believe in what you're doing, and can you communicate why? I love to invest in people who know what they're about and are passionate about doing it, and who, to the best of my knowledge, are doing it for the right reasons and in the best way.
Welcome to It's Not About the Money, a podcast in search of grounded fundraising. I'm Heather, and together with my co-host Andy, we look beyond the quick tips and formulas. Join us as we explore the nuance and complexity of ministry fundraising. If you want to thrive in partner development, not just survive it, this is the place for you.
Welcome back to the show, everybody. Today we have a very special guest with us, Misty Meschter, and Heather is going to introduce her here in just a moment. But this show today is about looking at the funding partnership from another perspective. So often those in support-based ministry seek to be well-trained in approaching others and inviting them into partnership. However, much of that training is not necessarily from the perspective of the partner. So today, we'd like to help those in ministry get a better sense of what prospective partners and donors care about and equip them to start viewing these partnerships from their angle. So, Heather, you had the pleasure of meeting Misty just a few weeks or months ago, and you thought right away after that meeting, wow, we need to have her on the podcast. So would you introduce her to us?
Yeah, absolutely. I am happy to. So yeah, as you said, Misty is a new friend. We had opportunity to meet a few months ago, and I was just really impressed with the way she carried herself. And it just really struck me as she was talking about what she does in her occupation, that she has some really good insights to bring into this discussion around fundraising. So I will let Misty share a bit more specifically about what she does, but she does work in business succession planning and advisement. So when organizations are going to be passing their business on, Misty and her team step in as advisors and counselors and as people that kind of guide them through the process of the values to think through and the practical items to do. And I'm sure there's so much in that description I'm missing, but Misty, I'd love to pass it over to you to kind of fill it in for us.
Thank you. You did great, Heather. Yeah, my company is called Pass It On, and that's almost exactly what we do. We do business succession planning for families who own companies, which means that we look at the practicalities of who should own this company, who can run it successfully, and if the original owner or current owner couldn't, was incapacitated or taken out in any way, or was ready to move on, what's the next step? And how do we get there in the best possible way under the most prudent and thoughtful process so that it can be done well and it doesn't all have to explode. So that's what we do. And we work with business owners all over the country and several in foreign countries.
So it's sort of like estate planning, but for on the business scale.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yep. And we do actually get into the estate planning. We're not lawyers, but we spend a lot of time in corporate agreements, shareholders agreements, as well, and vice agreements, as well as like wills and trusts and charitable planning for large donors and people who have a lot that they're responsible for. They've got companies that they control, as well as oftentimes wealth that they've amassed. Yeah. And many of the people we encounter are committed to being good stewards of what they're entrusted with.
Yeah. And I think, that was one of the primary reasons that we felt like this would be a really great conversation, because understanding, as you said, many of the people that you're working with in counseling want to be good stewards of the resources that they have. And I think that within that, the kind of the way you think through why people consider to give to what they do and the values that come to mind for them in those decisions, we just would really love your perspective as someone who's had opportunity to walk alongside others as they're weighing what they're going to invest in, and then for your own experiences in that.
It's funny, as I was thinking about talking with you guys today, it occurred to me that in our minds and in our society, we tend to divide, the wealthy from the ordinary. And we think of charitably inclined people as philanthropists and, politicians and actors and people that you would know who have foundations named after them. But we encounter in the work that we do, we encounter a lot of very quiet givers who would fit into that category if they wanted to make a big deal of what they were doing, but most of them don't. And a lot of people who are what you would think of as ordinary families who believe what the Word of God says and they want to give. Or honestly, some of them don't even know the Lord and they're just good. And they would like to give to something other than themselves. And across the entire spectrum, there are people who work for a living and teach their kids to give. And so there has to be somewhere to give too.
Right.
Yeah, that's a great point. Okay, so I guess just to kick us off, get us started a bit, is there anything you'd want to share about you or your family? I think when we met, you recently had a puppy. Is that right?
Yeah. Yeah, I have. So I am married to Caleb. We are, you can't tell looking at me just my face, but I'm 6'1" and my husband is 6'9", and we have two little boys, Ryder and Wyatt, who are 4 and 2 and enormous, strong, and wild. And we already had a Weimaraner to begin with, and we got a golden retriever puppy a few months ago. So my life is crazy.
Yeah. Oh, I can imagine. That's wonderful. Well, thank you for taking time out of what I know is a very busy schedule amongst the puppies and the work and the kiddos to join us. So I guess to kick us off with our first question, can you tell us about any experience you may have had with ministry fundraising, either a personal experience where you were fundraising or as someone who has been on the receiving end of being asked to partner?
I've been fortunate enough to be raised by parents who were pretty intentional about giving. And so starting at a young age, I think we each had a kid through Compassion that we adopted and did the, mom and dad paid the monthly and we wrote the letters and stuff to support them. But they wanted to expose us very young to the fact that there are lots of people doing good work, reaching out throughout the world to take care of needs that we aren't in a position to go and meet, but we can help support the people who are going. And so they made that kind of part of our childhood and our education. And I remember when I graduated from college, when I had my first real job that wasn't just trying to create a savings account, and I started actually thinking about, how do I give? I know I'm supposed to give. I want to give, but how much and to whom? I started kind of putting up my antenna, so to speak, for where do I really want to support? And I've had numerous conversations with my dad, who was my business partner as well, about the concept of giving and the thought process behind it.
Yeah.
And I think it's easy for people to sign up for something and then disconnect from it. And I'm not sure that's always best. There's probably nothing wrong with it, but the way that I've kind of grown in it is the Bible says to give as you've determined in your heart. And I've kind of learned that doesn't mean under compulsion.
Right.
And the Bible also talks about giving with a cheerful heart. And so when Caleb and I decide what we want to give to, we don't just have constant things set up. So we've set up systems just because our lives are busy and we've got lots of things going at all times, where we never want to be forgetting what God's providing for us. Yeah. We never want to be just taking it for granted and not thinking about how to put it back into the kingdom before we move on with our lives. So we do have systems to pull out of our income and reserve money to give. Yeah. But we don't have anything on autopilot in terms of giving, really. We want to be forced to sit down on occasion with each other and agree on what we want to be giving to at this point in time. Number one, because it's a little harder that way, honestly.
Sure.
It makes you have to, it's easy to set something up for an auto draw and then ignore it, and you don't think about it, and it doesn't hurt. And it doesn't feel like you're losing anything.
It becomes automatic.
We found it to be valuable. Yeah. To have to sit and say, this is a good chunk of money we accumulated for God. Now we have to give it away. And we've also found that we can do it a lot more joyfully when we have to make the decision to send it somewhere. And we can do it a lot more intentionally.
Yeah. So you're not giving monthly. You're just giving annually? Is that what that looks like?
No, we probably do it about every couple months to quarterly at the longest.
Okay.
Just so we'll revisit it on occasion. And honestly, what usually happens is we'll look at each other and go, when did we last do our giving? And we'll do it then. So
the thing that stood out to me, Misty, was that when you were young, your parents instilled the passion or the drive or the normalcy of giving even before you had the ability to give yourself. That's awesome. Have you done that? Have you tried that with your own boys?
Yeah. So I think we don't do a lot of monthly things. We have one monthly automatic support, and that's through One Child. It's kind of like Compassion International. It's a different organization. We happen to know the leadership over there, so that's kind of important to us. Okay. And we have a little girl in Africa that our son corresponds with and supports.
Sweet.
And we want him to learn that participating doesn't just mean sending money.
Right.
It means that we want to engage with her. We want to know her story and what's going on, and we want to bring her before God on a daily basis. And Ryder, my 4-year-old, is astounding at that. He loves it. Yeah. So it's fun to watch.
That's awesome. So when someone reaches out initially and indicates, they'd like to tell you about their ministry, what are some of the first questions that come to mind? Do you have certain kind of set questions that you usually just kind of go to?
I don't have a set of questions, but I do always want to know. I want to know what they're doing. Sometimes it's hard for someone to communicate to a potential donor what they're doing. And it's important for, especially with the way that we like to give, if we're wanting to participate, we want to know what are you up to? What do you need? What are the challenges? And why are you there? The heart of the organization and of the person is important to us, because we're not just sending money to some unknown set of people under a brand, under a heading.
Sure.
We want to know the people that are doing the work, because they're up against challenges too. And the best way we can support them is through prayer and funding.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I guess your response brings up a question for me. Would you say that in talking with someone, there's a greater weight on your relationship with the person? Or would you say that you really want to make sure you can get behind not only the person, but the organization that they're partnering with?
Good question. Yeah.
I think both are pretty important. That is a good question, Heather. When you and I were talking, I think I related it to sales. The requesting of support is a lot like sales. And I'm in the business world. Anyone who is in the business world is in sales, whether they like it or not. An engineer, a lawyer, a CPA, they all have to market themselves in order to have a viable business. So anyone in the world, besides maybe academia, medicine, to a degree, doctors have to market themselves. They're going to be in sales, and that's maybe the thinking that isn't always apparent. So when you're selling something, you have to sell your company because that's the backing organ. That's the one that's actually handling the funds and determining how it will be utilized. No matter how good the people are who are on the ground, if the organization can't be trusted, then you don't know where your money will go. So you do have to understand, who is this company? Who is this group? What is their history? What are they about? And that's what's always been really important to me, is kind of having a track record of who the leadership has been. What have they done in the past? What have I seen them do? How have they proven to be faithful with funds and with the people that they're sending out? And then in terms of the individual, I don't need a personal relationship with the individual. I love when I can have one, but I want to know what they're doing and why they're doing it. I love to invest in people who know what they're about and are passionate about doing it, and who, to the best of my knowledge, are doing it for the right reasons and in the best way. So if I see that and I feel like it's something I can get behind, even if it's something I've never had any interest in, I can get behind somebody who believes in what they're doing and whose morals align with mine.
There's a book. I was recently talking with some coworkers about this book. It's called To Sell is Human. And it's, I think, written by Daniel Pink. And it's all about moving people, how non-selling sales is all about moving people to part with resources, whether it be time or money or attention or whatever. And actually, he even calls out that academia and medical are both selling you, because teachers are selling you on the fact that this investment of your time and energy is worth something. It will bring you fulfillment. And another thing that book points out is that we move people to part with resources for their good, not for our gain, but for their good. And so I think it actually is really appropriate. And I know a lot of people can get real iffy thinking about what they're doing as sales. And I think we just need to reframe
the S word.
Reframe the S word and just help people see, no, honestly, you're just moving people. You're casting vision, you're calling them into something for their good that does require something, whether it's time in prayer or whether it's, resources in time or financial. So I think that's a great point.
Yeah. So
and you're giving them an opportunity. The main thing is that you are giving, when you are talking to someone about your mission and what you're doing, and you're asking if they would like to participate with you, that's what it is. You're not asking them to support you or make a donation.
Right.
You need to ask them, do you want to participate with me? And sales is a good word in my mind. It's a good thing because it's necessary for people to do what they're here to do. We always have joked with my dad. My dad and I have a bad rap in our family because we're the salesmen. We're the ones who, if dad had a pair of shoes when we were growing up that he thought was the best, everybody had to have that pair of shoes. I mean, he talked to somebody he didn't even know and convinced them why his shoes were the best shoes. And he didn't care if he earned a dime doing it. It was if he believed in something, he wanted everybody he knew to be able to have it. And that's the mentality that if everyone who's raising support and on a mission could have, it would never feel like they were begging. They're not begging. They are giving you an opportunity to participate in something they can't just get on a plane and go do. But there's somebody doing it. And
if you're passionate enough about it, it just kind of overflows out of you.
People will want to join you, that they want to participate. And so it isn't about telling them why it's such a good investment. And it isn't about making sure they have the metrics. It's about, do you believe in what you're doing, and can you communicate why?
Is there a difference between sales, as you're describing it, and casting vision, for example?
Not really.
Yeah. Okay.
It's all in the same ballpark.
Yeah.
You're absolutely right. It's about what is the purpose of what we're doing. I think where a disconnect can come in is somebody might say, well, what is this doing for the kingdom? What's the practicality of this work for what I'm trying to give toward? And if we can help people to communicate, to draw the link between this is why we do it the way we're doing it. Obviously, if an organization has been around for any period of time, that part has been thought out.
Right.
But maybe not everyone who is participating knows how to communicate it to someone who has no idea how it's structured or
no
why
context.
You do it.
Yeah. So it sounds like maybe a key area to really focus on if you're somebody who is trying to seek out partnership is to just really be able to speak well to the why of the particular work you're going into and make meaningful connections to your partners.
And the need within that people group and that destination. Location.
And in the business world, keep it simple.
Mm-hmm.
In the business world, we call it the elevator pitch.
Sure.
If you have, a minute and a half on an elevator with somebody and they ask you, what do? You've got to be prepared to answer them as clearly and succinctly as you can and get to the point. And so if people know how to describe what they do and why quickly and clearly, then when questions come, help them rehearse the answers to those questions. And honestly, I think it's a process of building up that language and the terminology that you need to say, here's why it's important to do it the way that I'm doing it. And here's why I'm doing it. Anyone who is with an organization has a reason they're there. And they're not there to get rich. So if they can learn and write it down, have them write it down, have them practice it so that they are comfortable with it. And if it isn't comfortable, change so that it's true.
Yeah.
That's how you learn to explain what you're about. That's what any successful business person has had to do for years.
Mm-hmm.
I wonder if you could give us a couple examples, maybe a positive and a negative, without giving details, of experiences you've had where you've been solicited for support and one was fantastic and you felt like, wow, God is clearly in this person calling me to take a step. What made that clear for you? But then also maybe there's a situation where it was also clear conversely that, wow, really this person is just focused on their own expenses, for example. How can people navigate that? Like, what are some must-dos or must-avoids?
I can probably use the same experience for both.
Oh,
interesting. Okay.
Yeah.
So we support organizations and individuals. And typically I want to know what the organization is before I sign up with just an individual who's under that, because it does affect what happens with the funds. And when it was like 20 years ago now, my younger sister was I think I was in college and my younger sister was maybe early high school. And I started wanting to give. And she had this gal in her life who was with the Navigators, pretty well-known organization. I love that organization, who had specifically chosen to invest in middle school and early high school girls in our area.
Okay.
And she was awesome. You guys, this gal, she was my age, so a young adult. I think she was attending a local university, on fire for God. And she was super great at holding people accountable and making these girls who said, and we're talking, 14 to 17-year-old girls, maybe even a little younger, who said, I want to follow Jesus. And she was like, great, we're going to get together. Every week, I'm going to buy you coffee. We're going to talk about it. We're going to read the Bible. And she was awesome at really shepherding these young hearts. And she had no problem calling out nonsense and saying, wait a minute, where is that, Lord? And making them get down to business. I was in school in California, and it was valuable to me that my little sister, who's 4 years younger than me, had someone there doing that she would listen to besides our parents. And I got to know her, and I loved her input. And then my sister aged out, and I kept supporting this gal. And this was a monthly support thing. And over time, I think she started a couple businesses of her own and started kind of doing her own thing. And at some point, I started realizing that this young woman who, from all that I could tell, really didn't have great income streams outside of the support that she had raised, was off traveling the world all the time just to visit people, and she wasn't really having the time to invest in the youngsters, which is what I signed up for.
Sure.
And regardless of how she decided to do that or what all went into it, after a time, that didn't feel like a good use of, if it was my money going to pay for a European vacation for several weeks
right.
that I couldn't afford to go on myself. I didn't really want to participate in that anymore.
Right.
And I wasn't seeing the fruit any longer. I wasn't seeing the investment of her time and energy or the fruit. I stopped giving. I cut off that stream of giving just because it was no longer something I really wanted to support. And here's the thing. If she could have communicated to me what she was doing and when and how, and there was a good explanation for all of the travel time and everything like that, or if I could have seen her businesses actually supporting that lifestyle, I would have had no problem with continuing to get. But the communication changed enough, and what I was seeing in her life changed that I thought, I don't think this is what I signed up for originally. So I'm glad I did it for the time I did it.
Yeah.
But I'm not going to participate going forward.
Yeah.
Does that answer your question?
Yeah. I wonder what percentage of attrition, of donor attrition, could be attributed to failure to communicate.
Oh, I think probably a lot. And it's hard to communicate too. You can't make your full-time job keeping people apprised with what you're doing. That's not what they're funding you for.
Right.
But it is important, it's especially in our world when we give, we pray over it and we ask wisdom. And when there is a disconnect or a lack of clarity, that's when you might change what you're doing as someone who's giving toward different causes. So
right. Because it doesn't sound like, because I guess what I'm hearing is it doesn't sound like you kind of saw, oh, she's taking vacation. That must not be okay. I think I'll stop giving. It's more that you had, okay, over here I see there's vacation. I'm not hearing much about ministry, or I'm not seeing much about ministry. And that's maybe what,
Or several vacations.
Yeah, lots of them. And she had been really good at communicating. That was kind of her strength in the beginning. You would get newsletters that showed what she was doing to pour into the lives of the young girls. And to her, in her defense, her life moved on and changed as well. As did the set of groups that she had to pour into. She was working within a public school system, and sometimes there's a season for something, and then it moves on. But that is one of, is this still what we signed up for? Is one of the questions that a donor who is paying attention asks themselves. When we're doing charitable giving planning for a state of business people, we actually tell them, don't name an organization in your trust. because the heads of the organizations change.
Hmm.
So if you really if you care about what your money is going to do, then instead create the right team of people who will give in the way that you're giving. And that's why we like for people to raise their children to learn to give, so that you can foster a mentality of stewardship and not be in a position where, 3 presidents down the line, the organization is doing something you wouldn't have supported if you were here.
Yeah.
And you don't want your money doing that. And so that's the kind of planning that we're doing for people who are charitably inclined.
So the value is pretty high on the issue of, do we align in values and worldview? And that needs to be reestablished on a regular basis, it sounds like.
Yeah, because organizations change. People change.
Yeah.
And so do organizations.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think the other value to call out from what Misty is saying is that don't give out of compulsion, give out of intentionality.
Mm-hmm.
Awesome. And you mentioned newsletters. So I'm super curious. What are the types of newsletters or communication pieces that you look forward to seeing every time?
That's a great question. I love a newsletter that tells me what the people that relates me to the people I'm reading about.
Okay.
I want to know if I'm supporting Jack and Susie under this umbrella of an organization. I want to know what Jack and Susie and their children are doing. I want to know what and not just what they're doing for the mission. I want to know what their life looks like. Because that gives me context to participate. If I sign up to support somebody, I am praying for them by name. I'm sending money because they need that, practically speaking, but I'm praying for them in their situation. And I want to know what they're facing with their children, especially people who are living overseas. I've never lived overseas with my kids, and I can't imagine what kind of challenges they face, and I want to know so I can bring it before God faithfully and realistically. And sometimes, guys, you don't know the resources that are out there if you're real with people. So you could be facing an obstacle, and if you are willing to, you don't need to word vomit all over people. You don't need to throw everything out there. But if you are telling them, here's the struggle that we're facing with school, and here's how we're trying to figure it out, but you're okay with being a little vulnerable, you could find that there's someone out there who's supporting you or reading what you're writing who can help, who has an outside of the box connection or way of helping. And that's the way it works in the business world. If I need a staff person, I could place an ad, or I can tell everybody I know that I trust who knows what I do that I need a staff person. I'll get a better person that way.
Yeah.
When you write a newsletter, make it engaging, make it useful, and make it short and sweet.
Yeah.
So that people look forward to getting it and can read it.
Yeah.
My favorite one is from my husband grew up in Molokai, Hawaii, on an island nobody lives on.
I know exactly what you're talking about. Yeah. There's
a little church there. The pastor and his wife are fantastic, and they are seriously swimming upstream at all times to pay for anything. People have to give so that they can have a refrigerator that works. It's hilarious, and they're so committed, and they're phenomenal people. Their kids are all awesome. And so their newsletter talks about the church and what the church is doing and what they're doing for the kids on the island with camps and stuff like that, but also is very real about their family, about what they're pursuing, where their kids are, what's important to them. And when I read it, I can see exactly what their priorities are, and I wish I had more to give them. I can support them 100%. Because they are engaged, they are humble, they are thankful for whatever they have, they are faithful to their calling, and they kind of have a sense of humor about all of it. And that's just delightful.
That's great.
Yeah. What I've heard a couple times, not just in this recent answer, but previously, is the importance of authenticity. That seems to be a recurring theme. Yeah.
I think people in general, especially in this current age and culture, it seems to me like everybody is so conditioned by constant information from social media, and just they're inundated.
Yeah, saturated.
And we've all learned you can't believe half of what you see and hear. So we are becoming, even more than we have been in the past, a very suspicious people. And so what that does is it makes authenticity very evident. It makes it actually really easy to see if somebody's telling you the same thing somebody else told you and it's a line they were taught, or if they are inviting you into their story.
Yeah.
Everybody has a story, and everybody wants to be part of a bigger story. So if you can be genuine, honest, but you don't have to tell everybody everything you know, but give them enough information about the high points that they can get in the boat with you and feel like they're part of it.
So I'm curious, Misty, if we put on some kind of fundraising training over a weekend and we invited you to be a guest speaker, what topic would you want to speak to in helping train people that are seeking financial support for their work?
A lot of options.
I think my strengths are probably storytelling, branding, helping them think through how do you communicate in a way that's attractive. Everybody out there, I think a lot of people tend to look at the world around them and go, oh, he's got a great story, or she's got a great story. And what we don't realize is every single person has a cool story. There's not a person out there who hasn't had a mess, some beauty, some struggles, some triumphs, some utter failures, something hilarious, something devastating happen in their lives. It's just that not everyone knows how to tell about it in a way that's engaging. And I'm probably pretty good at that.
Unearthing those nuggets.
Oh, I would be so curious to hear your training on that. It sounds really cool. I just want to point out that I feel like everything you've highlighted that you feel is important to be prepared in or to just exude, it's all skills or postures that are accessible to everybody. It's not like a certain type of personality. You've talked about confidence because earlier Andy, you said, it sounds like a person needs to be pretty passionate, but I would even say, passionate can even carry this expectation of, boisterous or
backslapping,
exuberant. Yeah. But I think confident is a really good word, to be confident assured in what you're doing. Yeah. Assured. Yeah. So I've heard confident. I've heard authentic, definitely, like you said, storytelling. Some people might be naturally disposed in the language and in storytelling, but storytelling is a skill you can learn.
You can learn it. Yeah.
All of those are skills. There are some people who have a personality that lends itself more to one than the other, but the reality is that anyone can learn to tell their story in a way that resonates. And the problem I think that most people run into is that they try to tell it in someone else's way. And if I'm an analytical person, I'm not real expressive, and I try to tell my story like the expressive person I want to sound like would, it's never going to come across as real.
Right.
And I won't believe it myself, and I'll hate having to say it. It's not even a difficult thing to learn, but you have to actually be willing to take the time and sit down and kind of do your homework and understand, why am I here? Even if you aren't a passionate personality, there's a reason you're doing this, rather than getting a great 9 to 5 that keeps you close to home. There's a reason you are making yourself and your family live outside of normal comfort zones. And that's what you have to understand and be able to communicate, is why are you here? Why does it matter to you? There are the other people it matters to, just the same as you.
So I would say there's one thing that is pretty dominant when I talk to people about their obstacles. It's very common for people to say, well, I've grown up in a house, in a family environment where we don't ask for things, or that shows weakness, where we just get things done and we pull ourselves up by our own bootstraps. So it's just really hard for me to humble myself and ask somebody else for help. What would you say to that person?
You're normal.
Right.
And, you know, I keep talking about my dad. I'm his clone, and I learned most of what I know from him. But he led a Bible study for men in Colorado years ago. And I don't remember how it came about. I'm sure he could tell you. But he basically challenged a group of men to dig into the Word and what they knew and study the various forms of greed. Jesus says to beware of all forms of greed, stating that there's more than one.
Yeah.
And simply being stingy with a lot of money is not the only kind. And I don't remember how many they came up with. And really what it boils down to is sometimes what we see as humility or, not wanting to ask for a handout, wanting to be able to do things under your own steam is a form of pride or greed. And we have to be aware of it. And just like hoarding money could be greedy, saving money can be greedy too. It all comes down to the intention in somebody's heart. When I, having come from humble means, am embarrassed or uncomfortable inviting people in to support and participate with me, that can come from a certain level of pride, certain level of personal embarrassment, a certain amount of greed, of not properly keeping, the king at the head and everything else where it belongs. And we all do it. And so I think when somebody says, I hate asking for a handout because it feels like I'm begging for something I should be able to come up with on my own, fine, but you're robbing other people of the ability to come alongside you.
Yeah.
I want to know what people are doing out there because I cannot hop on a plane with my 4-year-old and my 2-year-old and my dogs and my husband and my company and go into the unreached parts of the world right now. I can't do that. And that's not what I was called to do.
Yeah.
But I do create enough by doing what I was called to do to go with people and come alongside them. And I want that right. And I don't want to be deprived of it by someone else's pride.
Mm-hmm.
It's good.
Mm-hmm.
It's helpful for people to hear that, I think.
Yeah, so sometimes people get in their head about not wanting to ask for money, feeling like they would be begging or whatever. But other times people just get really in their head about rejection. What if the answer is no? Are they rejecting me? How do I feel about that? What would you say to someone who is struggling with those thoughts, either kind of paralyzed by fear or fear of rejection?
I would say take those thoughts captive. None of our value comes from the people around us and whether they accept or reject us. And it's also not about you. At the end of the day, if somebody comes to me with a mission they want me to support and I don't, it's not because I dislike them or mistrust them. It has nothing to do with them. It's because I was doing something else with that money at that time.
Yeah.
So, number one, just to remember, it's not about you. And again, this translates to the business world too. So,
yes,
I think the biggest thing is to keep going, number one, because the more you do it, the less the rejection hurts. Take it with a grain of salt and a sense of humor. And frankly, you don't know what those people are dealing with. It is not about you. It probably has less to do with you than anything else. And your job is to keep getting the message out there, to be faithful with it and persistent with it. And by all means, if you get rejected, make sure you go out again as soon as possible and keep going, because that is what creates the law of large numbers. That is what creates enough exposure that the people who do want to join with you and are at the right time in their lives and the right place in their lives can participate with you. And never, ever close the door. If someone rejects you, I would say, if you're sending a newsletter and stuff, be honoring, certainly, and don't hound them. Leave them alone. If you don't sign up, don't bug them. You don't need the heartache or the headache. And they'll get annoyed if you bug them too much. But circle back around in a year. Circumstances change, and never close the door. Stay friendly. Don't burn the bridge.
Yeah.
And you never know when you'll go and develop and change, and what you're doing will probably get shined and polished over the years the longer you do it. You might be in a different place. Somebody might be serving in a country, and they go to a potential donor who doesn't care about that, has never thought about that country, but has a real heart for a different country. That's fine. You can't change that. You might move to that country someday down the road, the one they like.
Yeah.
So, don't give up, and certainly don't take it personally. It has nothing to do with you.
Yeah. Yeah. It feels like if you believe in something enough, you should be willing to suffer rejection.
Everybody feels it differently, though. And I get it. When your identity is wrapped up in what you committed to do, it's really hard not to take it personally.
That's good.
But if you can just train yourself to remember, and that's why taking our thoughts captive is so important, because we don't really have the power sometimes to stop thinking in a certain way. But Christ certainly promises that he can change our thinking.
Yeah.
And so when we're stuck in that place, I think it's just important to remember this isn't your pocketbook. Those people are completely outside of your control, and it probably has nothing to do with you.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
It's helpful. Okay. Do you have a preference? I'm curious. Would you rather be shown a big need, a big expense, or would you rather someone ask you specifically for a certain amount of money every month, or a certain, how specific do you want someone to be? Or do you want them to just say, give as the Lord leads you?
I think a good combination is probably best. I think probably different people have different reactions to that question. Kind of be able to communicate what the specific needs are. I am the type that wants to know the specifics.
Okay.
Because of the way my husband and I give, which is probably weird, probably not normal, we will accumulate a stash and then go, where can we give this? How are we going to divvy this up? And obviously we have our favorites and we have our go-tos, and we almost have a proportion that we often fall into. But if we're aware of a specific need or a specific direction with one of the outfits we've kind of vetted, or some of the people that we already support, and we've got $5,000 set aside when we sit down to give money. And we would ordinarily go, all right, 2 goes here, 1 goes here. If I already know that there's a $4,800 need in order to keep this wheel turning over here, we have no problem sending all of it to that and saying, please use this for that need. We want to know. And I think that we can trust God to kind of make those things work, where someone can come up with the funds that are needed the day they're needed if they know about it. I think when it's too big, that becomes a little overwhelming, and you sort of feel like you're just dumping into a pot, like when a church is building a new building and they want to fundraise $7 million or whatever. It gets a little, you get a little fatigued continuing to pour into that bucket.
Yeah.
But when there's a specific need, particularly for an individual or a family, if the person I'm supporting, even if I'm on a monthly, say I give $100 a month to somebody, and they can't afford to fix their car because it would cost them $500. If I knew about that, I'd come up with $500 and send it directly to them so they can keep doing what they need to do.
Yeah.
Most of the time, people don't know.
That's good.
Yeah, that is good.
So do support raisers need to be cautious about asking for too much, about over asking then?
I don't know. That's a tricky one because I feel like, again, I think it probably depends on who's receiving this request. There will be certain people when you ask for a certain amount that ignore it because it's too big.
Yeah.
But then there will be certain people that when you ask for, a moderate amount, ignore it because it's too small for their attention. So
right.
I think probably the best way to go about it is maybe be specific when there's a real specific need. So don't go out of your way every time you communicate. Say, here are the different needs that we have, because I think that would wear people down as well, and they would start to kind of put you in the category of, well, they always need something.
Sure.
But when it's kind of new and apparent, or different, or it really is sort of painful, then speak up about it, and then the people who are giving to you can begin to trust you to let them know what you're dealing with and when, but also to not bother them all the time for every little expense, because they know that you're also receiving some kind of reasonable support and should be able to kind of meet your daily living expenses that way.
Yeah. And, I guess it just strikes me. I think sometimes we can all benefit from having need that's not immediately met, right? And I think that can extend to somebody living on support, as well as someone who has what seems to be a more stable job where there's a very clear paycheck. I think sometimes the needs that we have are formational, and we all experience them. Somebody that's living on support, as they're considering putting needs before others, I think that they need to realize that sometimes we all have need, and the Lord meets us very uniquely in that. It's not always in money to fix it quickly. Sometimes there is delay, but also I think just maybe not kind of coming to a point where you feel dependent on people to meet that need as much as...
Or entitled.
Yeah, entitled or dependent, as much as we're just all kind of in the same boat of always relying on God to meet that need.
No, someone who is sending funds to support something or someone, they don't want to feel like the bank. They don't want to feel like, oh, they're back for a withdrawal because they need something else.
Right.
Right.
Because they also, do recognize that whoever is spending money is doing it out of their income. And they also have needs they have to meet.
Yeah.
An example, though, would be if you are obviously prudent and careful as you manage your finances while living on support, and then something unexpected happens, like, whoa, if we want to send our kids to this English-speaking school here, the tuition is $15,000 or something crazy that you're not equipped to handle. That would be something specific that if I'm supporting you, want to know about. Because that's something I can bring to God myself and say, what part of that can I help with? And what's cool is when you do that, sometimes He provides through. We've had moments where we said, gosh, we want to help with this. We want to participate. What can we do? And as we're thinking about it, something shows up that we weren't expecting, and now we just have it to pass on. So it is a delicate balance, to your point, Heather. And I don't think anybody gets the right to stop relying on God.
Yeah.
And whenever we structure our lives in a way where we wouldn't be reminded of that, we're probably missing the point.
Yeah.
Let me dial in just a little bit further into this one question, then we can move on. So let's say the scenario is you're initiating a partnership with somebody, and they're asking, do you want them to ask for a general amount, or do you want them to ask like, hey, Misty, I was wondering if you and your husband could partner with us for about $200 a month? Do you want that specific, or would you like a range? Like, what do you have a preference, I guess?
I don't like the specific
Okay.
request. I think I'm probably wrong here. This is probably not the
You're not
way
wrong.
It's not a right or wrong.
of
Yeah.
doing it. But it is off-putting to me when people assume what I can get. I don't even like it with an organization like Compat, where you're sending all the ads on TV. $57 a month can provide 3 meals a day. To me, that is off-putting a little bit, and it's harder for me to commit to than a general personal conversation about, here's what I'm doing. I'd love for you to consider supporting me. And then trust that person that you're talking to say, how can I support you? What are the best ways for me to do that? Rather than you coming to them with an order form that you kind of given them 3 different ways to place an order. If you can focus on the relationship first and really build into the partnership and the relationship, I think you will come out better financially that way. I am always in to give more than the $100 a month or $200 a month. At the end of the day, as long as I can give it whenever I'm equipped to give it, and I don't have to sit there ahead of time and say, I'm going to sign on this dotted line. I want the freedom to rely on God to give me my options of where it's needed most. And I want to know that the people who are waiting, and I know that that's not realistic, because people kind of have to know what their bottom line is, what they're operating with. I get that.
Yeah.
At the same time, I have lived on commission and fees for all of my life. And I also have to wait to see where it will come from. And I have no guarantee of what will show up or when. So my life in business has been if not daily, at least an annual practice of laying out my fleece before God and saying, please make sure that I'm being faithful with what you've given me, and that I'm doing things in the way you want me to do them. And Lord, I just have to trust you to provide. So make sure I'm doing that. I want to have a right heart where I'm not keeping track and I'm not inclined to count and measure. Guys, I don't set goals. Everybody in the financial world sets goals and has big thermometers on the wall. They color it. It's ridiculous. I will not set a goal for the profitability of my company, because I think that's silly. And it just doesn't work for me. I won't work toward a goal, but I do trust that if I'm doing the right thing to the best of my ability for every person who's brought to me, God will make sure that I'm fine. And so far, has abundantly so.
It's a good perspective.
Yeah. That is a good perspective. We are so grateful for your time. I guess just a couple of final questions before we wrap up, but I'm just curious whether there are kind of top of mind some partnership meeting experiences that bring a smile to your face, and conversely, any that have kind of made you cringe, like that was not good or that was a little painful. Does anything come to mind for either of those?
I think I'm pretty visual. So I love seeing, and I'm people driven. You may have picked that up, but I love seeing pictures and videos of people who are being affected. I want to know what the point is, and this is all about hearts and minds and souls. So, I don't want to see a building being built. I want to see the people who are in it. And so I love it when I can see something like that. That's why I mentioned One Child earlier, which is basically meeting children in hard places who live in really hard places in the world. And it was through just videos of the actual people on the ground actually working with the kids and creating school and food for kids who are just super impoverished and living in really dangerous situations too. That made us want to just go and be there.
Yeah.
And as long as we can't, we're going to send money.
Yeah.
So,
that's good.
And so as soon as our kids are old enough, we plan to stick them on a plane and start going to those places and make them see and make them participate in what's out there so that they've got a bigger heart for the world. Cringeworthy, I can't think of any particularly terrible.
Okay, that's all right.
I can say that in general, when I think I can always kind of pick out someone who's pretty new at asking for support. And I've had a couple where I think they assume too much about me and they don't know. So they think it's their job to make me be charitably minded, and they don't know that I already am, and I already want to give. And if they would just tell me who they are, I'd probably be on board. But instead, they're so busy trying to tell me what they think I want to hear that I turn off almost immediately. And it's sad because if I could just stop them and say, hey, listen, it's like, have you ever had somebody try when we walked into a new church we were visiting one time, and my husband and I are both believers and have been for a very long time and very involved. And we walked into this new little church that's actually in our town. We just go farther to go to church. And every person in this church, it was like we were fresh meat. Like, really wanted to, welcome sister, how, acting like we weren't even believers and they needed to, proselytize. And we thought, that's their hearts were in the right place, but they really missed the boat and they were trying to be welcoming to non-believers, without even finding out where you're coming from. And honestly, if I were not a believer, I would have been more turned off probably and freaked out and run out the door. So I think if you don't give enough room for people to have context and really be more curious about them than motivated to tell them all about you, you might miss something that would be important for you to know.
Yeah, it sounds like they were more like playing the part than they were focusing on the person. Like playing the part.
A fundraiser.
Yeah.
Yeah, we were talking about sales earlier. And guys, the secret key to sales that nobody really knows, unless they already do it, is the most important thing about making a sale is understanding your customer. You have to listen before you speak. Yeah. You have to be interested. Who was it? John Maxwell, who said, show someone that you care. Or people don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. That's the key. Be interested in the people you're talking about. Yeah. Don't look at them as dollar signs.
Right.
Look at them as people who can come alongside you if they want to and invite them in your boat. But don't do it until who they are. That doesn't mean they may or may not be a possible donor. It means you will have a whole different story to tell if you know where they're coming from than you would otherwise.
Yeah. It's not a one size fits all.
Right.
Yeah. Very helpful. Well, as we kind of wrap it up here, Misty, is there anything we haven't talked about yet that you would really want people that are fundraising to understand or to hear?
I think we've pretty well covered all of it. I think the most important thing is to focus outward, not inward.
Yes.
It isn't about you. It's about who are the people that you're talking to. And guys, I want the people who are listening to this to remember that they don't represent a need. They represent a great opportunity to people who are working and putting stuff aside with an intention to do something with it. And frankly, most of them are giving it to things they don't even care about just because they're told they're supposed to give. So give them an opportunity to care about what they're doing with the money they're creating and with what God's entrusted them with.
Very good. Okay, so final question we ask everybody as we end the show. You have $10,000 that maybe just came into your little set aside money today, but you have to give it away in 5 seconds.
Right.
Or you have 5 seconds to decide where you're going to give it. Who or what do you give it to and why?
Oh my gosh. Well, you want an honest answer?
Absolutely.
Am I allowed to say it?
Preferably, yeah.
Honestly, if we don't have time to really think about it and we have to get it out of there, we are probably giving 40% of it to ELIC, 40% of it to our home church in Colorado Springs, and probably 10% each to the Leadership Foundation and that little church in Molokai that I talked about.
Oh, nice.
Cool.
Nice.
Very
That's
cool.
awesome.
Well, Misty, this has been such a good time, so insightful and helpful. And we're just really, really grateful for you putting aside the time to be with us today.
Yeah. Thank you so much.
My pleasure. It's been good talking with you guys. I hope it was helpful.
Absolutely. It's Not About the Money is presented by Provisio Fundraising Solutions. Provisio equips support-based workers with flexible training, practical resources, and one-on-one coaching. Find out more at provisiofundraising.com.